What's up guys, Haze here. Today I'm talking about Techmarine and the changes that they applied to it in the hotfix patch 12.1. So I'm going to go through the strongest build for the Techmarine currently for things like solo ops, team ops, stratagems. I can't say for siege because Techmarine doesn't have turrets in siege yet. Anyway, what I'll do, I'll go into the perks, go over what they changed, and then talk you through the weapon selection that I've got for this. So for the first column of the core tree, you're going to take the plasma enhancement. I've said quite a few times before, it synergizes ridiculously well with Omnissiah's Fury. So every time you do a shot with the plasma, it sets everything around that shot on fire. Usually takes about 2 shots to get enough stacks to apply burn for any Majoris enemies. But you fire 2 shots and then cancel the servo gun, and it'll use like 20% of its charge and set a massive group on fire. This is enough to where you have to do a tiny bit of damage and they'll be in execute range. Super strong combo, very efficient. It's got a very quick recharge, which means that you're going to benefit from inexorable salvo a lot more, because every time you use the servo gun, you're getting 15 seconds of hyper armor, aka knockback protection, from that use and onwards. Really good synergy. Keeps you on your feet, keeps a lot of damage in a wide area. For the second core perk, I like to go with Methodical Destruction. You do recharge grenades pretty quickly on the Techmarine with Replenishing Salvo. It's got a 75-second cooldown, unlike most classes, 90 seconds. So you find you have grenades quite a lot. And in fact, it's one of the only classes where I actually value frag grenades pretty highly, because they're good at getting a quick tag of damage to proc this 25% more damage, which, by the way, still does not work as the tooltip says. It doesn't apply 25% damage taken to the target that you hit. It applies 25% damage dealt increase to you. So if you hit one target with it, all of your damage to everything gets increased for 10 seconds by 25%. That's what makes this a very strong talent. For the third column, we're going to go with Long Range Barrage. We go for Long Range Barrage because you get the most value out of it, because we will be using the Heavy Bolt Rifle, which is extremely good from long range. And the other 2 talents within this tree aren't that good anyway. Your melee damage getting increased by 20% after finishes is pretty weak. It's actually about 8%. And 35% more damage from equipment doesn't really have any usable value, because equipment either one-shot stuff anyway, or does such little damage that 35% more isn't really useful. So then we get onto the 2 changes that they've added with the patch. I've already discussed Inexorable Salvo, but for the team perk, Battlefield Repairs has been significantly buffed. So now when you do a melee execute on targets, you get an additional armor segment. Considering the squishiness of the Techmarine, them adding a consistent hyper armor and double armor regen from melee executes actually has buffed the tankiness on Techmarine pretty significantly and put it in a pretty solid place. It's definitely stronger than it was before, and it no longer feels like a stiff breeze is going to blow you over. So for the second tier on the gear perk, we're going to take Replenishing Salvo, as I mentioned. 1 equipment charge every 75 seconds is super valuable, no matter what the equipment charge is, especially when you're getting a 25% damage buff every time you deal damage with it. For the third gear perk, we're going to take Fortifying Salvo. Again, just feeding armor segment replenishment is super strong on this class, as you don't have a fortitude buff, you don't have conviction. So just having as much armor to buffer the damage as possible is a really strong way to go. And for the signature, it's Omnissiah's Fury. Because of how much it synergizes with plasma enhancement, you'll see in this run, in boss fights, I can get the salvo off every 20 seconds or so, set 5 to 10 enemies on fire. It just farms me with executes. It keeps me safe because I get to replenish my armor so much, and it lowers the number of targets on the field significantly. For the prestige perks, I've got 3 perks that I would always recommend taking, and then 1 optional. So as we're using the Heavy Bolt Rifle, Acuity, or Chained Headshots as it's called here, 15% extra damage when you do 5 headshots, super strong, can't be undervalued. For the second one, we're going to go Furious Gunstrike. With the Techmarine, you farm gunstrikes, so having 25% melee damage for 5 seconds is pretty useful. It's enough to take you over breakpoints with applying burn and doing a parry gunstrike into a melee attack quite often with Majoris. For the third, I take Indomitable. This is extremely strong, really good talent that they've added with the patch 12.0. You become invulnerable whilst activating the Tarantula Sentry Gun. This means you get to start the Sentry Gun at the beginning of the fight, not after clearing around it. So you actually get really good value off your Tarantula Sentry Guns. As I mentioned, the 4th one is pretty optional. I like to go with Defensive Stance because I've been doing Absolute Plus recently, where you take a lot of range damage, but you can just take Stim Boost as well. I like this because it doesn't rely on you getting stims. It's something that can pretty much always come into effect, but it's up to you and your playstyle. Going into the weapons, there's a bit of a synergy within this build. Now, I use Argent Edge on the Techmarine pretty religiously because the gun strikes are animation free, so being able to interrupt and farm gun strikes from every combo that any enemy throws at you is ridiculously strong. You get the parry debuff on them, you gun strike them, which stuns them and anything around them, because obviously it's a plasma shot, which does AoE stun. So for the talents on this, it doesn't really matter what you're taking here. I just go along the bottom row so that I can get heavy onslaught. And then when we get to this middle section in the Artificer tree, I like to take Shadow Stab and Shoulder Bash. Shoulder Bash just for quick knocks on my Norris so that you can farm gun strikes for armor, and Shadow Stab because it's really good when you down in Nero or you get a Carnifex to charge a wall, just to get free damage off by charging a heavy attack. And we also take Terminus Slayer again for the reason I just mentioned. For the secondary, I used to take the Plasma Pistol and I realized I was never ever using it. I've started taking Retribution's Bequest literally for its heroic use. The only time you use a secondary weapon as a Techmarine is whilst your servo gun's active and you use it to gun strike. But this is a really useful thing. If something starts calling for reinforcements, you whip out the pistol, shoot it in the head. It's a free kill, or at the very least, it interrupts the call for reinforcements. So for the talent tree, it really doesn't matter for the purpose you're going to be using this. You're never using it as a DPS stick. However, I do take Headhunter along to Rapid Health, and then I drop for the ammo capacity, the damage and the first shot damage increase, and the little damage increase after I use the servo gun. And then lastly, for the primary weapon, I'm taking Deathwatch, the heavy bolt rifle, heroic grenade launcher. For this, I take the whole top line of perks, taking every headshot perk along the way so that we can pick up recruitment. For that extra armor, again, feeds into all the other armor perks. We're really starting to develop some armor generation on Techmarine now, so thankfully Sabre have given us a few tools for that, and we dip down here into Great Might just for 10% extra Terminus damage. Can be pretty good against Neros whilst you're spamming them in the face, and Perpetual Penetration makes clearing hordes actually pretty effective with this in general. So that is the whole build. The main differences, as I said, are the team and the first column of gear perks. We definitely take advantage of them for the extra armor and the knockback protection. And that's it. It's pretty similar to the build that we had for the start of the patch. But like I said, I wasn't using the plasma pistol for anything. I did think it would be good for interrupts or contested health, but you use the grenade launcher on this for contested health recovery. That's why you build into headshot damage, because the grenade's just for the health. And you get free kills on reinforcement interrupts from Retribution's Bequest. So if you've got any questions about the build, throw them in the comments below. I know a lot of people do like to go precision enhancement, and lethal perimeter is something I've tested quite a lot, and it does have some really good uses, but there's a lot more consistent damage and stability to be had from the Plasma Omnissiah combo. The best assault build for Space Marine 2 in patch 12.0. Assault has received a few changes recently, namely that it can now animation cancel with the jump pack dodge, which we will be working into the previous best build from patch 11.0. So to get straight into it, we'll go into the perk tree. And you might recognize a lot of this, but kicking us off in the first line of the core tree, we're going to be picking up Overcharge. This is because primarily we're going to be using the Block Power Fist, which Overcharge increases the charge damage of by 25%, and that's basically all the damage you do with this weapon. It also increases the Power Wave damage of the Power Axe if you do want to use that too, which works extremely well with this build, so you're not just locked in to the Power Fist. For the second column of the core tree, we're going to go into consecutive execution. This scales incredibly well. As you know, for any class, any equipment recharge is extremely powerful. For the third column in the core tree, we're going to be going with Knowledge of the Enemy, which stacks with the team perk Strategic Strikes, especially against extremist enemies, to give you 35% more damage dealt against them. It goes without saying that a fully tier 2 charged Power Fist strike will one-shot all Majoris and most Extremis. Maybe you'll need a little bit of damage on the top, but the amount of damage you're putting out with this weapon without having to do blocks first is just obscene. Into the gear perks, this is where we start to see some changes from the patch 11's build. You're starting off with Smiting Angel to keep that ground pound damage up, because it's going to synergize with Zealous Blow so that you can get into ground pound loops anytime there's Minoris around or you've got a few Majoris that are low. Any kills are going to give you 10% of your jump pack charge back, which is going to be ridiculously strong for clearing hordes, especially considering the Block, Power Fist, and Axe aren't that amazing at horde clearing. And then getting on to the changes for this build. Originally, you would run Pride and Duty and Ample Ammunition. Ample Ammunition because it was the only relatively decent choice, even though it was never that good anyway. But Pride and Duty, because 25% more ground pound damage for 10 seconds after an execute, was extremely powerful, especially for things like Siege. However, now that you can jump pack out of attack animations, we run Commitment. This means that we can attack as long as we want, and as soon as an attack is about to land, we just hit jump pack, do a perfect dodge through them, get the charge back, gun strike them, and just go back to pummeling their faces in. And because we're running this, we then take Aerial Grace instead, because you actually find yourself using the jump pack to do perfect dodges quite often, which gives you 30% more damage, not 25. Now, not to get too mathy with it, but this doesn't actually give a full 30% damage increase to all your damage. It's more like 15% more melee damage and 25% range damage because of the way the game calculates it. Whereas Pride and Duty actually does near 25% ground pound damage. This does scale better for ground pounds, so I will probably still run this for Siege. However, for operations, Aerial Grace is going to work really well with your commitment, and you'll see in the gameplay how I can just stand there and spam charge attacks, wiping out Majoris, and as soon as a melee attack is about to hit me, I do a perfect dodge, get myself a gun strike, it costs me nothing, and I get straight back to fisting my enemies. So, going into the prestige perks, you're going to start by taking Unyielding Oath. This is going to allow you to get up in the air, and as soon as you start aiming your ground pound, you're going to become invulnerable to damage for 3 seconds. You do not need to stay in the air charging the ground pound. That only increases the damage if you're running Diligence, which you should never run. It doesn't work properly. It doesn't work with block charges. So what this means in effect is as soon as you aim your ground pound and land, you still have about 2 seconds of damage and vulnerability. This is extremely strong as it can cover the following ground pound or a charged attack if you're only going for a tier 1. A super strong talent for your survivability. Secondly, we got Fortitude, again for the survivability. It's the only defensive perk you actually want to run. As Assault, you don't need armor reinforcement because you don't really want to be gun striking that much because they're a trap and we all hate them. And you don't really need defense mechanism because you're just a Giga Chad. You're going to do so much damage, your enemies are barely going to lay a finger on you, and when they do try, you're just going to perfectly dodge out of it because you're a gamer. Third up, we've got Hammer of Wrath. This is another change from the patch 11's build. So because of the way we're using jump pack, not just for ground pounds, but also for combat on a smaller scale with fewer enemies, you basically take this instead of Adrenaline Boost. So originally you get 10 seconds of knockback reduction after a perfect block dodge or parry. Now you get 15 seconds and 30% less range damage after using your jump pack, which you're going to use pretty often. So this is also a decent upgrade for the build. And then finally, I take Practiced Aim. You can take Duelist as well, which is a valid pick, as there's a lot of combos in this game, which can be pretty difficult to block, especially with the block axe if you're not using Duelist. Things like the Raveners 1, 2, 3 or the Whip Warriors 4-piece combo. So going into the weapons, the absolute best thing you can use for operations is going to be the Block Power Fist. It is still the GOAT of melee damage. It's ridiculously strong. Nothing comes close. With this weapon, you just stand there, charge shots. You'll see at the beginning of my showcase, I walk into the map. There are 5 Majoris. I charge my fist, and I instantly one-shot 4 of them. But there's nothing more to say on it. And to do that, you run this perk tree. So you start with Perpetual Strength, so that you can get into Heavy Preparation. This is going to let you do your charge attacks 30% quicker, and that's where all your damage comes from. So super strong talent. Then we take 2 Perpetual Strength, so we can move up to Focus Intention. Whilst your health's low, you take 50% less health damage whilst preparing said heavy attacks. So again, if you're low, you become extremely tanky whilst you're charging up these Giga Fists. Into Tide of Battle, which is a broken talent. It increases the range on the Power Fist up to 20 meters, not 8 as it says in the tooltip. Following Blow, so that you can follow up that charged fist with a quick hit, which usually takes you over any breakpoints you didn't meet with the first hit anyway. We take Strength of Will for even further damage reduction whilst charging the attacks. Into Combo, so that we can take Majoris Slayer, just for more easy Majoris purging. You're always going to take the Plasma Pistol fire rate version because you have enough range damage with the fist that the only reason you ever need to fire the pistol is to regain your contested health. That's it. So for this, you run the normal perk tree. You run along the top just for ammo increases and efficiencies. You take Divine Might just for a bit of extra damage, which is going to translate to more contested health recovery. And Perfect Cooling is decent, especially now that you're going to be doing more perfect dodges by using the jump pack to animation cancel. The only other optional you've got from here is to use the Block Power Axe, which is, again, insanely strong with this build. You run the following perk tree up to Cleaver so that you can get the Majoris, Extremis, and Terminus damage. You're going to go up from Tactical Retreat into Power Wave for bigger range on your backstep damage, and you're going to take the double Perpetual Strengths and Riposte so that you can do the little follow-up to the Power Wave itself. And that is the best build for Assault in patch 12.0. If you've got any questions or comments about the build, throw them in the comments below. I'll read them as quick as I can and get back to you. But other than that, peace. In this video, I'm going to talk about the strongest tactical build in Space Marine 2 patch 12.0. To jump straight into it, I'll get into the perk tree and then we'll go through the weapons after. So, for the first line of the core tree, we're going to be using Plasma Boost. This is because we're using the Plasma Pistol. Now, with the way the Pyroblaster is set up, we are just taking burn damage. Our direct damage is actually pretty low, so things like balanced distribution don't apply to it, and Crack and Penetrator is only for bolt weapons anyway. So you take the Plasma Boost because it massively increases the damage and efficiency of your Plasma Pistol, which you will be using whilst you burst stuff. So into the second column, we take Heightened Vigor. This synergizes ridiculously well with Battle Focus and the Block Chainsword to the point where if you get an enemy burning and then double block animation skip them, that's enough to kill any enemy except for a Terminus. It's a crazy combo. There are other builds that benefit from stuff like Relentless Pursuit, and there is a little bonus build I'll show you at the end, which works very well, but it doesn't quite beat this build for overall output and defensiveness. So for the third column, we're going to take Emperor's Vengeance to make sure our Pyroblaster stays nice and topped off in ammo, otherwise you will run out in between pickups. The great thing about running the Pyro is there's no question as to which is the better team perk. Secure Stockpile is always going to win out because your direct damage is all that is benefited by Aligned Aim, and the direct damage is a tiny portion of your Pyroblaster damage anyway. So then moving into the gear perks, we've got Vital Data, which is just to keep your Allspexes up for every Extremis pack. Otherwise, you might risk going pack to pack and not having it up. As I said before, Battle Focus is going to synergize with Heightened Vigor extremely well. If you do want to be an absolute boss melting machine, you can take Precise Calibration, but it's completely unnecessary. Precise Calibration is going to take your bonus Auspex damage from 170% to about 245, which isn't that much of an increase in the long run, especially when Battle Focus is going to apply to every enemy that you parry. For the last column in gear, you're going to take Concentrated Fire. 120% extra Auspex damage is massive, and none of the other perks really compete with it at all. For Signature, you're going to go Radiating Impact. This is a ridiculously strong talent. If you get the hang of it and play long enough, you'll start to get a feel for when it's up and ready, and it's enough to one-shot all Majoris that are near you, and usually finish off Extremis as well. It's got crazy cleave, and it can get you out of a lot of bad situations. So for the prestige perks, you're going to go Skilled Supplier, Resilience, Fortitude, and Spare Power. Acuity doesn't apply because you're using a Pyro and a Plasma. Second Look isn't going to apply because you're never going to miss your Auspexes because you're a gamer. And I can't even pronounce this. This last one is a tiny buff for being in a really bad situation. These other ones are going to apply all the time. So to get into the weapons, as I've mentioned multiple times, you're going to be taking the Pyroblaster, and you're just going to run the straight top tree and pick up Flashburn on the way, because the only other option is Contingency Plan, which you're never really going to be that low on ammo anyway because of Emperor's Vengeance. And you want to make sure you take up Pure Flame because the burn tick damage is insanely strong. Direct damage is pretty low anyway, so 50% more is just not much more. For the pistol, you're going to take the Fire Rate Plasma Pistol because it's got the best contested health regeneration in the game, and it can also interrupt things like Soul Reapers, reinforcement calls from really far away. It's definitely the best pistol to take with this build, and the gun strikes are also AoE, which is nice. And then you're just going to run this talent tree because you're going to pick up perks like Plasma Collection for extra ammo and Efficiency Charge to make sure with your Plasma Boost that you don't use up all your ammo in about 5 shots like every other class does. Then finally, for one of the strongest defensive aspects of this build, you're going to take the Block Chainsword, running the usual perk tree, starting in Perpetual Strength, through to Swift Recovery, Perpetual Strength, Saw Blade. No one cares about light attack combos. The only reason you want this build is to pick up Extremis Slayer for the extra 15% on Extremis, which is a true modifier. It's not like the other melee modifiers which don't do anything. And you want Full Throttle. This is what's going to allow you to animation skip, which is when you hold the melee attack for the duration between a light attack and a heavy attack, and then you hold it for a heavy attack. Does a load of damage. It gets you to the, I think, 3rd charged attack animation in 2 moves. Which once you've debuffed things with Heightened Vigor and Battle Focus, it's just enough to kill pretty much any enemy. So I've put together a run with this build on the new map, just to keep it fresh. About halfway through, I picked up a med stim, which blurred my screen, and it stayed blurred for the rest of the map. And the bridge decided to bug. However, you will see a Hellbrute melting in about 3 seconds flat. Every sort of enemy getting absolutely destroyed. This build doesn't really struggle with anything. It is hands down the strongest tack build there is at the moment. If you're going to run nightmare difficulty operations with the mod, this is one of the only builds that can really compete. So that's about it for this build. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm going to show you a quick bonus build because this is something that we've been testing today. It's very strong and it's very fun, especially if you don't like using the Pyroblaster. So just to give it a quick mention, all you're going to change is these two perks, Relentless Pursuit and Balanced Distribution, just to give your range damage a quick buff. And then you're going to run the Bolt Carbine, the standard headshot build, giving you recoupment for extra armor, Gunstrike Reload, which is going to synergize really well with Relentless Pursuit. You're going to use the Heavy Bolt Pistol damage variant for more Gunstrike damage, using the following perks. And the bit that holds this entire build together is the new Heroic Combat Knife, which is so much stronger than people think. It doesn't even matter remotely what you talent this. It's all about Scathing Retort. This allows you to interrupt any combo and get a gun strike from any parryable move, not just the set specific parryable moves that every other weapon has to adhere to. So no matter what it is, as long as it's not a dodge melee, if you use this parry and you get it successfully in the window, you'll interrupt whatever the enemy is doing, get a gun strike, which is going to do a boatload of damage because you've got battle focus, and it's going to increase your bolt carbine damage like crazy because of Relentless Pursuit. And it's going to reload the bolt carbine because of Gunstrike Reload. So you basically just run around ripping things heads off with hip fire damage. It's a crazy strong build. It's just not quite as strong as the Pyro. So that's it. That's everything to the tag for patch 12.0. Until there's any changes, this is it. I will update if there is, but otherwise throw any questions you've got in the comments below. Peace. Today I'm talking about the best Vanguard build for patch 12.0 in Space Marine 2. It might come as no surprise to many of you that there have been no changes to Vanguard, and we will be running the same build as we did in patch 11, but I will talk you through all the perks for any new players to describe why you take them and how they benefit your class. To kick us off, I'll go straight into the perk tree and then I'll come back to the weapons after, as there's a few to discuss for the primary. So for the first core line, we're going to go with Upper Hand. This is going to give you all the knockback protection you need to get you through any operational situation with the Vanguard. You won't need to take any other knockback talents. Into the second core perk, you're going to go with Conviction. This synergizes exceptionally well with the Vanguard's natural armor generating perks like Launch Restoration and Restoration, as well as bolter built-in armor perks like Recruitment on the Bolt Carbine. What this means is that every time you generate armor and something does damage to you to break your armor, you're going to get this 10 seconds of 25% damage taken resistance, which also synergizes really well with Fortitude to give you quite a good defensive package of perks that all work together, as well as Vanguard's innate perk of contested health regenerating 50% quicker. Moving on into the third column, you're going to take Consecutive Execution, killing 7 enemies in rapid succession, recharges your equipment by 1, cooldown 90 seconds. Like with most classes, any equipment recharging perks are extremely valuable, especially when there aren't really many better perks to take. For the team perk, you have one of the strongest team perks in the entire game. You've got Unmatched Zeal, and it's one of the main reasons that people ever take Vanguard on operations in general. If it wasn't for Unmatched Zeal, the pick rate for Vanguard would probably plummet through the floor. Going into the gear and signature perks, we've got a few that work together really nicely to put an actual fun aspect to this build. You've got in the second column Zone of Impact, which synergizes with the signature perk Tactical Prowess. This means if you get someone below 33% and use your grapnel on them, you'll fly into them, automatically execute them, and explode them with a boatload of damage that's going to get most Majoris around them into the same sub 33 range. This sets off like a chain reaction where you grapnel a target to execute them, explode, everything around them is below 33%, then you can grapnel any of them, make them explode, and finish off everything else. It's a really good sequence of class ability moves that does a lot of damage, takes up no ammo, generates armor, and keeps you invulnerable through the whole cycle. But going back to the first column, we have sort of a backup here, because if you've played Vanguard for 10 seconds, you'll know that the grapnel targeting system in this game is pretty poor, and the likelihood of you hitting the target that you actually intend to can be a bit of a pain. So quite often you'll hit targets that aren't below 33%, and you won't activate this whole destruction cycle. So it's nice when that happens for these perks to proc, of which I take Restless Fortitude, so I get 40% less range damage taken for 10 seconds. Again, just to keep you healthy whilst you're trying to recoup your grapnel charge. So for the third column in the gear tree, you're going to take Thrill of the Fight. This is because usually your grapnel is not on cooldown, because it restores itself when you use it for a finisher. And then the same reason for combat readiness. You don't need recharge if you're playing the build correctly. Whereas Thrill of the Fight will have a lot more uptime. Going into the prestige tree, we're going to start with battlefield awareness. If a target's within 8 meters, you deal 10% more range damage. This works really well with the bolt carbine and the melter rifle. Not so much with the instigator rifle, but we'll get into that later. Then you're going to take Fortitude, Launch Restoration, and Restoration. As I've sort of described already, these three together synergize extremely well with things like Conviction and your class's innate CHP recovery, just to give Vanguard quite a lot of tankiness for a class that only has 2 armor slots. In fact, it's more tanky than Assault, Techmarine, and Sniper, although Sniper can always just lol heal. So moving into the weapons, as I mentioned a couple times, there's a few options, and it kind of depends on your playstyle and how you like to fill your role within operations. I personally like the Instigator bolt rifle, however it does have quite a low ammo capacity, so you do resort to picking off single enemies when the situations are less hairy with the heavy bolt pistol. But the heavy bolt pistol and block power axe are going to stay the same no matter which primary you're going to run with. So if you're going to go with the Instigator bolt carbine, I'd recommend going with the heroic version as it fires 5 bullets per burst and running this talent tree. This is going to give you a load of headshot multipliers, a recoupment perk similar to the bolt carbine, and also finisher reload, which is going to reload you every time you do a finisher, which you do quite a lot on Vanguard. For the bolt carbine, again, for nearly every carbine weapon in the game, if you're new, you're always going to run the top tree just for the headshot damage because they just scale with more damage than any other build. So you pick up extended magazine along the way for the extra ammo, go right through to recruitment again for that armor regen. After gun strikes, the weapon instantly reloads. Really helpful just to keep you going. And then optionally, you can also run the melter rifle, which I like to go with decisive reload, because again, you're performing quite a lot of finishes, so it does help with the ammo regen, especially as with the melter rifle, you don't have a lot of ammo to begin with. Speaking of which, you go with the ammo variant. For the heavy bolt pistol, we're going to go with the ammo variant. Again, Vanguard struggles a little bit with ammo generation, as in it has none. So you take the heavy bolt pistol for that good gun strike damage, but you're also going to run the ammo variant just to make sure that you've got something to rely on, especially if you're going to run the Instigator bolt carbine as a main. So for the perks, you're going to start with Headhunter, into Adamantite Grip, then onto Rapid Health, and then you'll drop down to increased capacity and go along the whole bottom row of talents. And then finally, for one of the stronger aspects of this build, or for any build with it in, you'll take the Block Power Axe. For this, you start with Perpetual Strength, you roll through to Coup de Grace, into Perpetual Strength, and again, Perpetual Strength, woo! Counterattack, down to Riposte, on for hard target, Tactical Retreat, Power Wave, and Cleaver. This is basically all you ever need to run with the Power Axe. You mainly just want to pick up Cleaver as it applies to Majoris, Extremis, and Terminus. Power Wave is good for that extra range on the Power Backstep. Even though the wording says Power Backstep Wave damages more enemies, that's not actually how it works. It doesn't increase the number of targets, it just increases its width and range. And as with previous patches, that is the Vanguard build. It is still the strongest. Nothing has changed for it. So if you've got any questions about the build, please throw them in the comments below. I'll get back to you as quick as I can. But otherwise, peace. In this video, I'm going to talk you through the strongest Bulwark build of patch 12.0 in Space Marine 2. Bulwark is in an incredible place right now. It hasn't been changed for a few patches, so the build is pretty much the same as it was last patch, but I'll go through each perk, especially for you newer players, to explain exactly what's going on. So, getting into that perk tree, we're going to kick off on the first core column with Intimidating Aura. Intimidating Aura might be one of the strongest perks in the entire game. The only reason it's not strictly a guaranteed pick is because it's also on the same row as Conviction, which is one of the strongest defensive perks in the game. However, Bulwark is such a defensive class, it doesn't need Conviction. It already has other talents, which you take because there's nothing better. So you just stick with Intimidating Aura. It does an obscene amount of damage, as in it'll one-shot most Majoris within a 5-meter radius every 5 seconds by doing a perfect parry or block. So safe to say, one of the strongest defensive perks you can take that also works on a defensive basis. It's a low-risk, high-damage perk. It's exceptionally strong. So, going into the second and third core perks, we're going to take Scramble Targeting and Steal Within. These are going to offer you a bunch of survivability and defensiveness. Again, there aren't very many better options to take over them. Armor Reinforcement is something you could debatably take instead of Steal Within. However, because you're playing block weapons, you're not going to be gun striking that much as the Bulwark, so you usually get a lot more value out of Steal Within. And with the way the class works, you just get tankier and tankier as your health gets lower, especially when using the Power Fist, which you will be. So for the team perk, Focus Restoration, again, it's a super strong perk. Everyone benefits from having armor, especially classes that can't generate it quite as much. So it's super strong perk, synergizes with Steel Within, Scramble Targeting, and your base health being higher by 30% as well, just to make you this giga tank of a Bulwark. So going into the first column for gear, you can optionally take Purity of Purpose for some decent AoE damage whilst you've got the flag down. However, I like to run Rapid Regeneration because it makes your armor restore so fast that if it's just melee enemies on you, they physically can't damage your health, because in between every melee attack, your armor restores a tiny bit because it's regenerating so quick that they can't get the consecutive hits quick enough to break the armor and then your health. And then for the second column, we're going with obviously Invigorating Icon, one of the strongest perks, if not the strongest defensive perk in the game. It's going to give anyone who's near you all the contested health back. The only competition for it in terms of healing in the entire game is Unmatched Seal, but obviously for this you need Extremis Executes and you're limited by the number of Extremis. With the Bulwark's Invigorating Icon, you can heal all your teammates and recharge its cooldown constantly with Masterful Defense with one ranged enemy. It's incredibly strong. Then for the final gear column perk, we're going to go with Merciless Resolve. This is going to offer you the knockback reduction for your class. It's going to save you having to go for Armored Advance. So all you need to do is every 10 seconds or so, throw down a Shield Bash, get yourself 15% more melee damage, and make yourself unknockable with light attacks. For the signature tree, you're going to go into Defensive Mastery. This basically means that every time an Extremist wave spawns, your first parry on them is going to completely delete the first Extremis. It's hilarious, it's broken, it's just a free kill on the Extremis spawns. Moving into the Prestige perks, you're going to start by taking Overcharge, probably one of the strongest melee damage amplifiers in the game. It's going to work with both the Block Fist for nearly every move you do, and it's going to work with the Power Axe as well if you do choose to use that on the Power Waves, which again is most of the damage you're doing with the Power Axe. Then you can choose between Auxiliary Reload and Powerful Shot. Depending on how your ammo economy is, with the Power Fist you basically don't need extra ammo because you're only using it to contest your health and interrupt people. So I generally go with Powerful Shot. And then for the following two perks, I go with Masterful Defense to recharge your ability from the ranged attack spam. Things like Devourers, Soul Reapers, even Minoris cultists can get your shield to recharge your ability in a matter of seconds if it's a Soul Reaper. And then finally for Standard Bearer, when you're in those oh crap situations, you slap down your banner, get all that 300% armor regen speed, get invulnerable for 2 seconds, you physically can't be killed, and you can just spam damage and heal yourself. Did I say Bulwark was strong? Bulwark's pretty strong. So going into the weapons, as usual, all reliable, Block Power Fist comes through in fine fashion. You're going with the normal talent tree, picking up perks like Heavy Preparation to make sure that you're getting your charge shots off nice and quick, going into Focused Intention to give you some more defensives whilst you're charging those attacks, same as Strength of Will, and Following Blow just to follow up those charge attacks with a big backhand that usually is enough to finish any Majoris, taking the top tree through to Majoris Slayer for that extra 10% against Majoris. Optionally, you can run the Block Power Axe with this tree. However, it's way less offensively strong. It's more of a defensive weapon, and it's pretty good to use with the Shield Bash build, which is a bit of an honorable mention. Something that I'll make a different video on. But for all intents and purposes, this is the strongest build you're going to be able to use with Bulwark, and it's also going to be by far the strongest build to benefit your team. Just to finish this off, we'll go with the secondary weapon. As I mentioned before, this is your healing stick, effectively, and interrupts from ranged, I guess. But you're going to go with the Plasma Pistol Fire Rate version, taking the following tree just for ammo, efficiency, and reserve, and also perfect cooling just to get rid of the overheating on a perfect dodge. And that's it. That is the Bulwark build. It is ridiculously strong. It has some insane damage using stuff like Intimidating Aura, Defensive Mastery, and Overcharge. And it has obscene levels of defensiveness with a combination of its native 30% higher health, 25% less range damage, Steel Within, Focus Restoration. It's just got all sorts of combining factors to make it ridiculously strong. And when you do eventually lose your health, which is covered by a bunch of damage reductions, especially with the Power Fist, you can just drop your banner, heal to full, get all your armor back, do the same for your team, and you're ready to go again. It is ridiculously strong. There's no content in this game you can't do with it, and your teammates will love having it on your team because you can snipe zone tropes out the air, heal them to full, and laugh at them when they go down. It's a good time. So any questions about the build, throw them in the comments below. I'll get back as soon as I can. Peace. In this video, I'm going to be taking you through the strongest heavy build in patch 12.0 of Space Marine 2. Now for this patch, heavy has received 0 changes, so the build is the same as the last patch, but I'll take you through all of the perks for any new players and describe why you take everything, and a few changes I've made to the build myself, just to keep it fresh. So, jumping straight into the perk tree, for the first core column, you're going to go with Restoration. Generating armor is never a bad thing, especially when your class has a perk like Conviction. Anytime your armor is broken, you take 25% less damage for 10 seconds, so every single time you generate armor and then re-break it, you re-proc Conviction, which gives you a really strong defensive loop, especially on top of perks like Fortitude. So anyway, going back to Restoration. Killing 7 enemies in rapid succession restores 1 armor segment, cooldown 15 seconds. This is always going to work on the heavy, no matter what gun you're using really, but multi-melters and heavy plasma incinerators are going to have that on farm. It's exceptional. Multi-kill you don't really need. An auxiliary ammunition you don't need because you're going to have the prestige perk auxiliary reload. So going into the second column, you're going to take Fortitude because 30% health is a massive boost to your health pool. Again, synergizing with Conviction. For the third column, you're going to take Overwhelming Power. When Iron Halo is active, all squad members within 10 meters deal 10% more range damage. It's a nice little buff for you and the team, and it also synergizes very nicely with Brute Force. When Iron Halo is on cooldown, range damage is increased by 15% for you. So whatever you're doing with your shield, which you'll be activating and deactivating quite a lot, especially for things like this, you're always going to have a little boost to your range damage, which is nice. For the team perk, Encompassing Aegis is something that I take because I play a lot of Siege, so all squad members take 25% less range damage, which is a massive defensive boon. However, if you're playing Operations and you're not finding range damage to be too terrible, especially since you do have the Iron Halo, you can go additional supplies. This is going to help out all your teammates. Into the gear perks, you're going to take Consecutive Execution. Again, with every other class, any form of equipment recharge is extremely strong, especially if you're able to find something like a melter. This is going to pull the whole build together for things like Siege, and also your other options are not that good for this column anyway. For the second line, traditionally I used to take Field Adjustment. However, actually reading Power Regulator, I realized it does the exact same thing as Field Adjustment. It just doesn't have the 25% durability reduction. So we take Power Regulator now, and we move on to column 3. For column 3, you're going to go with Brute Force, again, synergizing with Overwhelming Power. The range damage is most of your damage as a heavy, as the melee isn't really a part of his skill set, and you're never going to build into it because it's just weak no matter what you do with it. And then finally for the signature perks, offensive capability is what I take. It's extremely strong against Tyrannid for things like weeds on the floor, whatever they're called. It can be decent against spore mines as long as you don't move forward too quick. It kills Minoris just by standing next to them. Cultists, it just bowls over like a giant Deathwing bowling ball. It's pretty fun. And it also helps chip damage on things like Extremis when you're standing there parrying and gun striking them in the face. It's a really strong perk, especially when you're switching Iron Halo on and off every time you dip into a fight. Conversion Field has its uses, however, the likelihood of you standing next to your teammates whilst it's working for them to actually benefit from it in any meaningful way is pretty unlikely, again, compared to something that you can use constantly for extra offensive damage. Going into the prestige perks, you're going to start off with Auxiliary Reload, which is going to be your only form of primary weapon recharge. So make sure you're getting the Extremis Executes as long as, you're not with a Vanguard who needs the health. Secondly, you're going to go into Conviction as it ties the defensiveness of this build together with the armor recharge and your big health pool. Then Indomitable Spirit. This is your only form of knockback protection within the tree itself. Obviously, the guns have some themselves. And then onto Duelist. Duelist, just because you're playing heavy, which is using basically balance parry windows, which are already a bit tricky at times, and also Reverberating Impact, Exponential Force, and a Honed Precision are all pretty bad anyway. So moving on to the weapons, you do have 2 pretty strong options as the heavy. If you want the absolute maximum damage output that you can do, you're going to go with the Heavy Plasma Incinerator Fire Rate version. So for the perk tree, you're going to start off with Common Cooling, into Rapid Cooling, onto Heavy Velocity, as every shot you do with this weapon is going to be a fully charged one. Unless you just really need some quick contested health recovery or to clear some Minoris, you're never going to do non-charged shots. Then you go down into Plasma Collection, onto Efficient Charge, which are going to work together to give you a strong ammo pool, which you can replenish very well with your Auxiliary Reload. And passing through Brutal Rampage, which is really strong, because killing 3 enemies with 1 shot happens constantly with the Heavy Plasma Incinerator. So extra 25% damage for 5 seconds is going to work for you exceptionally strong. If you're doing operations, I'd recommend going with the heavy bolt pistol ammo variant, as you're not going to have enough primary ammo to get you through the whole operation, and you'll quite often have to resort to using your pistol or using it in advance to protect your ammo supplies, and then pulling out the primary when you need to clear like a lot of enemies. So for this, you're going to go with Headhunter into Adamantine Grip, Rapid Health, and then drop down to run along the perk tree just to pick up your ammo increases, mag increases, damage, and first bullet damage. If you're going to play something like Siege, I'd recommend using the Plasma Pistol Fire Rate version, as this is going to let you contest your health quicker, interrupt things from a distance. You're going to go with this perk tree. And for your other primary option, you can run with a multi-melter. The multi-melter is exceptionally strong and a lot easier to use than the heavy plasma incinerator, so make sure you run the ammo variant and use the following perk tree: increased capacity, elite restoration, heavy fire, heavy immunity, which again, like I said before, this is going to give you some knockback protection on top of what you're getting from your gun strikes, executioner's fire, heavy might, pick up trick shot, just more armor generation is always going to help you, especially with conviction, heavy might for more damage, death strike, which is a really good perk to get into the habit of tracking, because if you can get your executes with your melee, then 25% more range damage for the next 10 seconds is going to take you a long way. Increased capacity, and then divine might for the last bit of damage. And that is the heavy build for patch 12.0. Like I said before, not much has changed, just a bit of a different decision on the second column of the gear section. But besides that, the build's exactly the same. Any questions, throw them in the comments below. Peace. In this video, I'm going to talk you through the absolute strongest build for Sniper in Space Marine 2 patch 12.0. This build is an awesome combination of ridiculous range damage as well as some insane melee one-shots, as you'll see in the showcase video a little bit later. So to get us into the perk tree, starting us off on the first column in the core tree, you're going to begin with melee mastery. This is just going to be useful for taking out Majoris enemies, and with the weapons that you're using, shooting through block stances isn't something you need, and who cares about our teammates, right? Onto the second column in the core tree, you're going to go with adaptability. This is for the manual activation, increasing your melee damage. This will feed into your melee one-shots due to the melee weapon that you're going to be using. For the third column, you're going to take Iron Grip. This is going to give you increased sniper damage by 15% against terminus level enemies, which also synergizes with your team perk of extra headshot damage. This will result in you destroying neurothropes so fast that the extremis you get at 50% won't even land on the map before the neurothrope is dead. It's pretty fun. Going into the gear columns, you're going to take Purification. Part of the playstyle with this build is that you're doing a lot of cloak cancelling by using the cloak and immediately hitting melee, so that you go into stealth, which lasts 2 seconds due to lingering concealment, but it doesn't go on cooldown. So you always have your cloak ready to heal you if you do take some contested health damage. For the middle column, you're going to go with targeted shot. Because we are using the sniper rifle, being able to go into stealth, fire off a bullet for 75% extra damage on this ridiculous headshot modified piece of kit. You'll be one-shotting Majoris, usually without them going into an execute phase, especially if it's off the back of a gun strike from exacting focus, of which you can get multiple shots off if you're quick enough as well to gain that 75% range damage buff. So obviously with the third column on the gear tree, you're going to go with lingering concealment, like I've just mentioned, for that 2 seconds extra camo. This is actually really strong for the sniper, because when you're in camo, all the enemies will stand still unless there's other enemies nearby. So it's really strong for solo content. This also stacks with Emperor's Grace, so you can stay invulnerable and invisible after doing a cloak cancel. It's really fun. For the signature tree, you don't need to go for evasion because you're always going to have cloak ready to use when you want it anyway. So you take Pattern of Excellence, the strongest equipment recharge perk in the entire game. Every 3 consecutive headshots is going to give you an equipment charge with a cooldown of only 30 seconds. You're going to be smashing headshots so much with this, you're always going to have equipment ready. It's really good. For prestige perks, you'll start off with Emperor's Grace. Again, when cloak activates, you become invulnerable for 2 seconds. This is a super strong talent, because anytime you take some damage, you heal it with Purification by activating your cloak, and then you're invulnerable for 2 seconds. This can immune you through things like your own melter bombs, Hellbrute's AoEs going off, neurothropes, piss beams, just generally a super strong defensive to have. For the second one, we're going to go for exacting focus. After a gun strike, you deal 20% more range damage. The way you're going to kill most extremists in this game with this build is you're going to do a perfect parry into a gun strike, which is going to stun them, give you 20% more range damage, and whilst they're stunned, you're going to shoot them in the head with your sniper rifle. This is enough to one-tap combo pretty much every extremist in the game. I think it's only biovores that will survive this combo. They'll need a second shot from the sniper, but that's it. For the third perk, you're going to take Conviction, one of the strongest defensive perks in the game. As Sniper doesn't have Fortitude, it just has its ability to heal. Taking less damage when your armor does break is really vital. This is an absolute must for the Sniper survivability, because you run the risk of getting completely one-shot with certain abilities if you have no damage reduction whatsoever. And then finally, Indomitable Spirit. While performing a gun strike, you don't lose control upon taking heavy attacks, cannot be knocked back. This just works with exacting focus, allowing you to get those quick combos off on any melee enemies that attack you, especially extremists. So that's the perks. They work in conjunction with the weapon selection, which I'll talk you through now. So for the main piece of this kit, you're going to go with the primary weapon. It is the Wrapped Bolt Sniper Rifle, the heroic version, and you're going to go with the following perk tree. You're going to start with Remote Threat to give you more damage at further range, because a lot of fights you'll just start from a mile off picking off Majoris, so usually when you get in there's not really much to finish off. Survival Instincts, when your health is low you get more damage anyway. Moving along, you've got Fast Reload, so that you can go into increased capacity to get that 20% more overall ammo, because obviously at the start you only have 6 bullets. This will take you up to 7. Gonna go Headhunter for, again, 10% more headshot damage. Strong Start is really strong, obviously. You could go for Strong Finish and run the bottom row. However, with this, you're relying on wasting ammo in the first place just to be able to get the damage buff on the last round. It's definitely not a realistic way to play, as the enemies randomly jerk around all the time. So I would highly recommend you run along the top row for Strong Start and make sure you keep yourself reloaded for an extra 25% damage. Then we go into Cleaving Fire. Shots will penetrate block stance, dealing 25% of the usual damage. Another reason we don't really need to go for block breaking. And that leaves us in Recoupment, which killing Majoris level or higher enemies with a headshot will restore 1 armor segment, cooldown 15 seconds. A really strong defensive for a class that doesn't really have that many. Going into the secondary, I like to take the damage variant bolt pistol, running the following perks just to pick up as many headshot modifiers as possible, and damage and ammo. I mainly run this because it doesn't really matter which pistol you're using. You only really want it as a gun strike stick just to proc the gun strike damage. But as a sniper, having a silenced pistol is extremely cool, and we all know about the rule of cool. And then for the boss slaying aspect of this, at least the melee bosses, and also you can use this on extremists as well, we're going to take the heroic Power Gladius knife so that we can get the perfect dodge melee damage buff of 120% damage, stacking up to 3 times. This you can use against stuff like Hellbrutes ridiculously well. You get your 3 perfect dodges, dip into stealth for that 25% extra melee damage, and then charge your Shadow Stab for 2 charges, giving you a further 400% extra damage. This makes the stab do like over 50% of their health, and if you follow up the combo you still have a few seconds, like a second or two of damage buff left. As this buff lasts for a second, you end up doing obscene damage in a quick combo. But for the overall tree, you start with Perpetual Strength, you run along the bottom row so that you can pick up Shadow Step. I like to take Shoulder Bash just for the movement tech of it, and also knocking Minoris quickly for quick armor pickups from gun strikes. Just so you can go through to Terminus Slayer. Melee damage increased against Terminus by 20%, just feeds into that overall one-shotness. And that is the absolute strongest sniper run you can build. It has obscene damage from range. It has great recovery with Purification. It's got great melee. Because you're using a balance or a parry weapon, not a block weapon, you're stunning enemies with the gun strike follow-up. But if you have any questions about the build or any comments, throw them down below. I'll get back as soon as I can. Peace.